Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today here in the studio is Lene Wetteland. She is from the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, and she was an expert and part of the mission of the European Platform for Democratic Elections that took part in the referendum in Armenia on constitutional reform on December 6th. Lene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You were here, as I said, with EPDE. You were working with Transparency International and the Norwegian Helsinki platform as part of a citizen observation mission to oversee the vote on December 6th. Certainly, I do want to talk about your impressions of the vote. And a very important point for our audience to know is that you have been coming and going to Armenia since 2005. You're very well informed. You were here in 2008 following the contested presidential elections. You have worked in Central Asia, so this is an area of expertise for you that's also part of your life. During a press conference on December 7, following the vote that was marred by many violations and irregularities, you said something that struck a chord with us here at CivilNet, because this is what we have been trying to say, that that it has to be a free expression of the people's will. And what did you say that day?
Well, that day we were saying that due to the large amount of systematic violations, both during the campaign before the vote and also on voting day, this vote cannot be seen as an expression of the people's will. There might be good parts among all the big amount of amendments suggested to the Constitution, but they didn't cover all the necessary things that had to be changed if there was to be such a big change in the Constitution. They were not debated in detail in society, so people knew what they were all really about. There were several challenges with the whole process to begin with that made that, together with the lack of trust that is already towards the authorities and to the election processes in general, that this already came off to a bad start. And then when on voting day there were so many blatant violations, and in particular the pressure, the harassment and even physical violence used against observers and journalists, this really cannot be seen as a legitimate expression of the people's will.
Right, we've been saying over and over again that in our estimation, you know, for those of us who have been covering elections in Armenia for many years, this was probably one of the worst elections that we saw, because it was so blatant, because they didn't try to pretend that we reverted back to ballot box stuffing, which is such a crude form of sort of in-your-face violation. But I want to talk about the role of the observers. Again, in these elections, first time the profile, the awareness and the publicity that the observers received from the media about their role, again, unprecedented. In your experience, citizen observers in any country during elections, how important is their role in ensuring a fair vote?
Citizen observation is crucial. The Norwegian Helsinki Committee, we have our main motto for what we do is to cooperate with civil society, because we are convinced that the people in their own country know best their own country. They know which are the challenges, what is the most important thing to address first, in which order, how to do it, and we support initiatives that are already there. In Armenia, there are several organizations that do citizen observation. They know their countries, they know their neighborhoods, they know the trends, and it's me coming just a few days before the election. I can never have the same overview as citizens observers do. And they also, unfortunately, experience the vote in a more honest way than an international observer. In the EPDE there is also a Swedish organization, Silk, and the representative from the Swedish organization this time, she was an Armenian by birth. And even if she was from an international organization, she was approached as Archikjan and subject to the same kind of treatment that
local observers were receiving.
Observers are getting, even if she has spent a lot of time out of the country, and most of them in Sweden. But a citizen observation is very important both for the community around the observers. They are discussing their experiences with their community, with their families, and those are the people who need to change their own country. We cannot do that. I can say what I find problematic. I can compare with international standards. I don't like to compare with other countries, but we should compare with international standards. And there is definitely a long way to go for Armenia in that sense.
What were some of your findings? Because I've been interviewing a number of people who were part of the mission, either from EPDE or from the local observers, and they were saying that in those precincts, in those polling stations where observers were able to stand their ground, who knew the law, who knew what their rights were and what the responsibilities of the Electoral Commission was, that there was a significant sort of difference between those polling stations that didn't have observers. Is that what your findings are showing?
That's very much what they are showing. We had a mission of 6 experts from Russia, from the Golos group, right. And also together with all the observers from Transparency International and Helsinki Citizens Assembly Vanazor, as you were saying. And they are reporting that where they got the protocols, the numbers more or less remained the same. The same was the fact in my precinct. Mm-hmm. And I was impressed by the local observers. I saw that they're really standing their ground and they are letting people know what they are doing wrong, and that they will report on it. And even if they were pressured to try to not to do anything about this information, they have submitted it. Right. So due to their very hard work, in some places, yes, there were less violations, even though in other places the heads of commissions refused to take their complaints and said that you just have to manage.
And were any of the observers physically attacked? I know there was cases of intimidation. We saw them on YouTube, because with digital technology, people were, using their smartphones and, posting it on YouTube. We could see the kind of abuse that they were getting from the commission heads and other members. What were some of the violations against the observers themselves?
Well, in the polling station where I arrived to attend the counting, when we approached the polling station, we saw that one local observer was in a very heated debate with the head of commission. And I heard that my Armenian is quite limited on this, but I heard she was saying that you are tampering our work, we're about to finish now. And he says, well, I've been trying to make you write down this complaint for many hours. It's your fault that it's now only at this hour. And in the end, she agreed to write it down, but then we were 4 observers standing around her, the 2 local and me and my Russian colleague. So in the end, she took it down, and it appeared that this local observer, he had been hit on the head by a representative of the regional election commission who had been to the polling station. The observer was using his right to film him and what was going on. And this is also on YouTube, that you can see the observer is talking to the regional representative, that he hit him on the head.
We were also hearing instances where at the last minute a number of so-called observers at 7:30, 7:45, because the polls closed at 8, just minutes before the polls close, they storm in. Okay, storm in is not a right word. They walk in and they say we're observers with the RPA or with the Republican Party and whatnot. And they were creating sometimes, there were many instances where during the vote they would pretend to start a fight, tables would be turned over, and in that commotion, while everybody's attention is diverted, they're switching the ballots. Yeah. You were telling me a story earlier about a member of the Republican Party who was asking you how Scandinavia was, and your answer was very interesting. I'd like you to share it with us again, if you could. Yes,
we were at a polling station in a school where there were 2 polling stations next to each other, and like an area in the middle where the heads of commissions assured us that this is not part of the polling station. That's why there can be. That's why there can be a lot of men in black jackets telling people what to do in this particular part. And since there was a lot of pressure and obvious guiding from other Republican Party proxies, we stayed there for quite a while. I even accepted coffee, even if I shouldn't. But we stayed there for quite a while, and we got into conversation with some of these guys. And one of them is saying, yes, Scandinavia is such a nice part of the world. I would love to live in Sweden. And I'm telling him that, well, Scandinavia and Sweden, it's a nice place to live because people trust each other, because there is respect to each other, because people follow the rules, and there is a democratic society where you express your will through democratic processes and through the media. And if you're not happy about anything, you can voice it. So I'm saying if you want to live in Sweden, it's better to start changing your own country. Firstly, by not participating in what you're doing now, because you are contributing in making Armenia very far from a democratic society and very far from Sweden. So I was just encouraging him to start with himself, right, to make Armenia more similar to.
And I think that's the message. You know, oftentimes during federal elections, there will be, you know, OSCE, ODIHR missions, PACE missions, observation missions, and they come and they spend a few minutes at each polling station, then they move on to the next. And of course, while they're there, people are very careful to be following the rules, and after they leave, God knows what happens. And then they make their, you know, they have a press conference, they release their preliminary report, and everybody in Armenia is upset that they didn't call out the government, that they said, well, it was mostly in line with international standards. And the question that I think that we need to ask ourselves in Armenia is, well, we need to clean up our own house and not depend. I mean, it's great that they come, but the focus should be on us fixing our own house, cleaning up our own house.
Yeah, this is, I completely agree, and this is, as I mentioned, the main work of the Norwegian Helsinki Committee in general, and in particular on elections through EPDE. That the local observers have so much to say in this process, because they know better how to focus, how to address where the problematic issues are. And sometimes as an international observation mission you get more attention than the local observers. But again, our information is based on cooperation with the local observers, so it's much better, I have to say, than the OSCE ODIHR. I've also been in OSCE ODIHR missions, so I know observers there also do very thorough work when they are observing, but it's in the process of writing the report that often the result is so.
A local observer, like you said, not only about knowing his or her community or the country's need, but they have a more vested interest. Because it's about their future. Yes. So I think that this time we had 500 electoral polling stations where we had observers. There's 1,997 precincts, polling stations in Armenia. So we have 2 years ahead of us until 2017, less than 2 years until the parliamentary elections. So what would be the key things you would tell the local observers for them to be able to hold on to the vote?
Well, one of my main points is that voting day is not actually the most important. The most important is what happens between the elections and between the voting days. And the work is not over now, even if you observed. It's only just beginning, and now it's the time to start debates and to talk with your family, with your friends, and try to create this community where people will just say, no, I'm not going to participate in anything like this. Why would I force anyone to vote against their will? Why would I take money for my vote? That's unheard of. Why do you think that I would accept? Why do you threaten me? Why would you do anything to my mother if I don't do as you say? It is hard in a community, a society where there is poverty and unemployment and so on. But just stand your ground, and when more people start to say, no, this is completely unheard of, then it will be easier for others as well. It's a small country, and the power is even smaller in people, so the people have the power, basically.
Yeah, and I think this is the most important message, that it is a small country, it is easy to change the paradigm, start a new narrative, and that discourse, and live by example. Yeah.
And there are already good initiatives with demonstration, social network, and so on. But
now
much
we need
more
to
potential.
build upon it.
Yes,
well,
start working now.
Lena, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you did. We look forward to the reports and the analysis to see how effective and impactful the citizen observer mission was, and hopefully in 2017 they will be able to cover all the polling stations across the country.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Lene Wetteland. She is from the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, an expert for the European Platform for Democratic Elections. Keep following CivilNet.